everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm also the creator and the moderator of thechocolatelife.com. Today's topic is going to be researching chocolate and cocoa on the interwebs. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing some of the tools and the techniques and the philosophies that I use in my daily job as a consultant, as a journalist, and as a critic about chocolate. Before we head over to dive deep in today's episode, I want to remind everybody who's watching today, go into the comments and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. Not if you're connecting on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I can see that here, but what country you're connecting from. So let me know and I'll get that shout out up on screen. And if you have any questions or any comments about what it is that I may be talking about today, put them into the live chat on YouTube or to the comments on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I will get those questions up on the screen and I will attempt to answer them during the course of today's episode. And I also, before we jump over there, want to remind everybody that today's episode, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. And here's the homepage of the Chocolate Life today. You can go there. This is live. All the links are active. It shows you what's going on now. If you would, really, really briefly, click the green button on the top. Yours will say join. And if you do that, you can become a member of the Chocolate Life. There has always been a free tier. And so I appreciate everyone's support there. What you can see here, down here, you'll see a heading here that says Pod Save Chocolate. And here is a link to previous episodes. Here is a link to the current episodes in what's called the top rail. And then there is, in fact, an archive of every single past episode as well as upcoming episodes. You can go here and you can find all of that information. And here is the post for today. So we're going to jump into it. So researching chocolate and cocoa, the tools, the resources, and the philosophies that I use. I have, so I come to the world of cocoa and chocolate from a background in high-tech startups. So my first high-tech startup was in 1983, and I joined it after graduating from Rhode Island School of Design, where I happened to take the first ever computer class, which was taught by graduate students at Brown University. And among other things, I got a chance to visit the precursor to the MIT Media Lab, which is the Visual Language Workshop, which was headed up by Muriel Cooper. And so my connection to trying to understand sort of the intersection of fine arts and computing goes back to the early 1980s. And my job, when I got to this high-tech startup, it was a company in New Jersey. I was living in Manhattan. It was called Artronics, so art and electronics, right? Was to help artists who had spent their careers working in conventional media navigate their way into using computers and tools. And so part of my role was to understand the questions they have about the technology and sort of map those questions onto what the new tools were, right? Another part of my job was keeping on top of what the industry was doing. So how do I make my company's products competitive with all the other products that are out there in the marketplace, and then trying to anticipate, where the market or where the tools are going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So I had this forward-looking brief remit in my job, and I also, from 1984 until about 1995 or 1996, was a regular contributor to trade magazines and technical journals. I was writing about technology for widespread audience, as well as being a consultant to a couple of Fortune 500 companies whose names you would recognize. And so I took these skills of, researching my competition, of writing about my competition, understanding what the users of the tools that I was helping create, what it was that they wanted, and how to talk to them about how their jobs would change, the disconnect between how they're thinking about things and the way the tools work. That was all something that I did over the course of actually close to 20 years before I got into chocolate full time. So I am, really very fortunate to have had this background and then be able to apply it to chocolate. And ultimately, what I, as a journalist, want to do is I want to discover an underlying truth. I mean, there's rarely the truth. I mean, so I want to discover a truth, and I want to have an opinion about what it is that's going on. And it turns out that having this 20-year history working in high technology gave me a perspective of high technology. And I had personal experience dating back over the course of the 80s, the 90s, into the early 2000s. That when I was exposed to a new idea or a new concept, I could go, this makes sense to me, or it doesn't make sense to me. And then I was able to go and do some research and be able to figure out um, whether I could rely on the story that I was being told, or whether I needed to do more research to find out how the story was being manipulated, or not fully represented, in order to be able to find out some ground truth about what it is that's going on. And so that is what it is that I bring. That is my philosophy. It is to begin by being skeptical, right? And so not to accept everything at a face value, to understand who it is that is making the representation, to calculate my knowledge of that person or that company and their history, the context in which a story is being told, in order to be able to come up with my opinion about what it is that I am being told. And so today, right? So today being not today right now, but today, what I use a bunch of tools. I use a bunch of tools in order to be able to help me understand, um, to help me able to understand the story that is being told, and to be able to form my own opinion, and then to be able to tell my own interpretation of a story. Again, so the most important things based on my history, right, is number one, pay attention and recognize useful patterns, especially pay attention to things going on in the periphery. So one of the things that I learned very, very early on, and so this is in the mid 1980s, is that your attention tends to be focused straight ahead, right at you. And if you let your attention be focused on sort of a literal narrative, or a very, very narrowly focused perspective, that there will be things that come from the periphery, things that come from the outside, that are going to have an effect, all right, that you're not anticipating, right? And it's really, really important, really, really important, that even though, for example, my interest is in cocoa and chocolate, what I do is I pay a lot of attention to other stories, because I never know when a story um, from some other discipline is going to is going to provide me with perhaps a clue to better understanding. So it's really, really important to pay attention to the periphery. Now, one of the things I learned, I mean, at one point in my career, I was walking one trade show at least a month. For like 3 years, I would go to a different high technology trade show, and I would be, again, what I'm doing is I'm being asked or tasked to be able to say, okay, what's coming up on the horizon a year from now, 2 years from now, that my company might want to incorporate into our products, or something that we think we might be able to do better. And there was a literal interpretation of the periphery, which is at many trade shows, all of the new companies, their first stands are literally against the walls of whatever the exhibition hall is. And so one of the first things that I would do is I would make sure that I walk the periphery of the trade show. It's the first thing, because that's where I'm most likely to see new things from companies that's never heard before, never heard before. So if you're going to a big trade show, maybe it's a fancy food show, could be snacks and sweets, it could be IBIE, could be ISM or Pro Suites. Whenever you're doing something like that, think about starting off at the periphery, right? It's a really good way to figure things out, right? The other thing that I do, just from a trade show perspective, is focus immediately, the first thing you're doing, and making sure that you see everything. So walk up and down every single aisle, be very, very disciplined, be very, very organized, and make sure you see everything, right? And then, when time permits, what you do is you go back and you go take a look at the things that you think are interesting. And sometimes, you'll walk down an aisle, and what you'll do is you'll find that there's one stand that's completely empty, and the stand next to it is completely full. That's a signal, right? So pay attention, look at patterns, and look at the periphery. Really, really important. So part of that is learning how to look for information and organize the results of your research, right? And what you want to do. So I'm sort of my the way I organize things tends to be in 3 days. So I mean, I will put things in a pile over here and put things in a pile over here, and there'll be a pile someplace else, or I'll have a folder on my desktop, and I will organize things loosely into these areas. Now, I am not one for putting things into very, very narrowly defined pigeonholes and categories. And I love going back through sort of like my downloads folder and then just go taking a look, after 3 months, why is this still in my downloads folder? And then looking at things, so previewing them to understand if, oh, now I know something new, or I remember why I kept a copy of it in the first place, or I can delete it. But there's a value in not being super organized and then having to go touch a pile you haven't seen in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then going through and going, oh, this now has more relevance to me now than it did several months ago. Or, oh, I still don't know if this might be interesting. Let's put it back on the pile. So developing your own methodologies for helping you remember things, for putting things in places that will remind you of them, number one, or that you can be reminded of them, that will help you develop patterns, because recognizing these patterns is going to help you remember things. You'll put them in your brain and you go, seeing something will trigger a memory. So it's really, really important that you learn how to look for information, learn how to figure out how to organize it in ways that help you categorize it and retrieve it. Really, really important key. The third one is remain skeptical. And it's really important that what you do is you go take a look at something, and then ask yourself, okay, who is benefiting from the way this information is being presented, right? And one of the techniques and tools around this remain skeptical is when you're looking at a press release. What I want you to do is I want you to find out if there are any primary sources that are linked to, not primary sources that are quoted, right? So you may go to an article in the website of a trade journal, and what they're doing is they're going and they're recounting an interview. Well, you don't know if the person who wrote the article actually did the interview, or what they're doing is they're quoting from a press release. And so you want to, if you can, go in and find out, okay, is this from a press release? And what they've just done is they've rewritten it, or is in fact this a bit of original reporting? And one of the ways to do that is to take the phrase or one or more phrases that are in the article, right, and just do a search on them in Google. And what you may, if you find the exact same phrase showing up in 3 or 4 different locations, which you know that this is a press release that somebody has rewritten. And what you should do is you should go and actually read the 3 or 4 different versions that you might find out that show up in the search results, to find out if something has been left out, if there's some other interpretation which the author or the editor, so not the author, which the editor has made on top of the press release, right? But the first instinct should be to not accept what is being said at face value in full. Really, really important to do that, right? So the other thing is, what you're seeking for always is a truthful position, right? You want to seek a truthful position that you can represent, right? So it makes philosophical sense to you. It makes mathematical sense to you. It makes logical sense to you. It makes political sense to you based on whatever it is. You want to have a position that you can represent, right? And that you're confident in. This is really, really important. Now, this position you have, it is a truthful position, right? It may not be a perfect understanding. I don't think you can ever come to a perfect understanding of really, really complex topics, and cocoa and chocolate and things like sustainability. These are all very, very complicated topics. And so having a philosophy, having a position, and then being able to use that understanding as a tool to be able to parse through, right? parse through things that you come across. Really, really important, right? So it's also important in that context to have opinions, right? To have opinions about the facts and speak what you believe to be a truth about the facts, right? At the same time, what we can say, and this is something, people who have followed me know that the words you choose to use inform your belief. And we may not choose the words we use. The words you use inform your beliefs. The beliefs inform your actions, and actions have consequences. All right. So it's really important that even though you might have opinions about the facts, so you're entitled to your opinions about the facts, you're not entitled to your own facts. Right. Right. So you have opinions about the facts. You have to be willing to change your mind. You have to be willing to be open to new facts, right? Additional facts, more information that you knew, and be willing to change your mind. And then, if necessary, apologize, right? For mistakes that you have made. If you have made a mistake, you need to admit the mistake in public, right? And let people know you do it. And then finally, as everybody knows, for the chocolate life, you got to have fun while you're doing it, right? Yes, these can be extremely serious topics, but you're working with chocolate, right? And so you want to make sure you're having fun while you're doing this. I think that there needs to be this animating, underlying exuberance, right? Which we bring to the topics that we're talking about, especially when they are challenging topics, especially when they're things that people may not want to have heard, right? That we have this underlying and we retain this underlying sense of wonder and enjoyment in what it is we're doing. And we make sure that that comes across in what it is that we're doing. Right? So now that I've sort of etched out a philosophy in terms of the way I organize things, I want to jump into the tools that I use. But before I do that, I want to do a quick shout out to Elmer Pineda, who from Yohoa Chocolate from Honduras. Hey, Elmer, glad to hear that you're joined us today. Thanks for letting me know. And also for everybody who may not know, several weeks ago, I did an episode of Pod Save Chocolate, which featured Yohoa Chocolate in a live tasting. And you can go here into the PodSafe calendar archive. You can go search for probably Yohoa. And there we go. So it was episode 14 on Friday, January the 28th. So if you want to go watch that afterwards, you can go watch that afterwards. Okay, back to today. Thanks, Elmer. Thanks for the shout out. What I want to do is I want to talk about the tools that I use, right? And the first thing I want to say is I have no financial compensation, no interest whatsoever in any of the tools that I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm doing this because I'm telling you what I use on a daily basis. There's no affiliate commission. There's nothing associated with any of these things, right? So I just wanted to get that straight, right? So if you're working on the internet, right, the number one tool that you need to consider is the browser, right? A lot of people are using Chrome or Chrome forks. You might be using Opera. You could be using Epic. You could be using Firefox. You could be using Safari or whatever it is that Microsoft is selling these days, Edge. Any one of these browsers provides you with a set of tools that you can use. The browser that I am using today, it's the browser that everything is done right here, is a fork of Chrome, right, which is called Arc, right? And so if you want to, here is a link to a company called the Browser Company, and the Browser Company is developing the Arc browser. You can learn about the browser and you can download it, right? And by the way, there's also a version. This is started out as a Macintosh only version. They're in the process, if they haven't released a Windows version. So it's good. And there's also a version for iOS, which is very, very interesting as well. So what I want to do is I want to talk about what I find to be the most interesting aspects of working with Arc. The first one of which is, here over on the left, which is the way the sidebar is organized. Number one is up here. I have a list of common extensions which I have added to the browser, so I can get at these extensions very quickly. One of which is a calculator, so I don't have to go to a separate app. I can just click this button, and it's important that this is always available, no matter where I am, right, in my browsing history, right? I have these extensions instantly available. Now, I've also gone and said, here are some pinned websites. So here is Gmail, here's Google Calendar, I use Proton Mail, I use Google Keep, here's a link to the Chocolate Life, here's a link to the back end of the Chocolate Life, a link to StreamYard, which is I'm using today. I talk with my developer using Trello. But no matter where I am, right, and what it is that I'm doing, I always have access to these links, right? So I don't need to find the browser in which my mail is in and then switch to that browser. And if there are multiple tabs in the browser window, go to the specific tab. I can't tell you just how much more productive I am in doing this, right? So you'll notice, over here as I'm moving from left to right, that what I'm doing is I'm scrolling between collections of tabs. Right. So I have a tab which is called main, which is general personal stuff that I do, like my banking and things like that. So they're all organized into this space, right? And from this space, I can navigate to a space where all of the links associated with my working on the Chocolate Life. So you'll see here, it's called TCL. So I can manage the server. I've got, I can find out if this site goes down, what's going on. Ghost is the tool that I use. Right, there all these things. So I can organize all of my tabs that I use, not only into individual spaces, but then I can organize them into folders. And as you might imagine, this is really, really convenient, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm working with Arc browser in my window on my main computer, and I have a window which is opened on a secondary screen, which is what I'm showing you here now. And the contents of both of those windows are identical, right, and sync, which is also, again, I can work on one screen or the other screen. What it is that I'm looking for is exactly the same on both screens. It's not like I have a gazillion different browser windows open and I need to think about all the tabs that are doing it. So just in terms of organizing my work, this is an amazing productivity boost for me. So I have the Chocolate Life is one of the spaces that I put together. I have a space which is where all my social media are. So I have my main and tertiary social media. I was writing a letter to somebody earlier, and I need to go back to a post on the Chocolate Life. I have this is my space for everything having to do with Pod Save Chocolate. Really, really important that I can have this kind of capability. All right, and so it just in terms of organizing things, it is great. Now these tab collections will sync between my phone and my browser. They're backed up into the cloud, so I have some security with respect to that. So it's just really, really, really useful, and it's also possible to set up profiles so that I could say I have a work profile, I have a home profile, I have some other, or if I'm working with clients, I could have profiles for each client, which enabled me to organize my work even further. Right. One thing which is also really, really cool, which I've mentioned, is that we have a section here which is called pinned tabs and a section called today's tabs. Right. And what happens is if I put a new tab in today, I can say, well, at the end of every day or at the end of every 3 days or at the end of every week, what they're going to do is they're just going to disappear. If I want to keep them, I need to pin them. And so there's less of a cognitive overload in terms of maintaining the number of open tabs that I have in my browser. Again, really, really, really helpful in terms of organizing my daily work. Now I'm going to get rid of this banner, this title overlay, and I'm going to get rid of that for the time being. What I want to do is I want to talk about another interesting aspect of what it is that Arc does. So I can let me go over here so you can see it. So I have a traditional find. right? So I can, so I'm looking for Yohoa, right, which is the highlighted blue, and it says, I can't find the word Yohoa on the page. So what I can do in the context of search is I can just click on ask. And so what it says is, can I help you find anything on the page? It turns out there's nothing about Yohoa on this page, so it's not going to be able to help me very much. But what I can do is I can tell, so tell me about ARC, right? And what it will do is it will search, right? Um, it will search the current page and tell you something about what the contents are in the current page. Now, it may not make an entire sense here, right? But if I am looking, for example, at a news story, so here's a news story that I have pinned, right? Um, it's going to take a little while. So I can do a quick search for uh, Texas Pete. It'll find Texas Pete in the page, but then what I can also do if I can ask it another question and it will find me something about this page. So it's really, really cool to be able to have the ability to find, not only find stuff on a page, but to generate a summary of what's on the page. Now, um, it's really important that if we're using anything which is AI generated, that what you do is you learn to take whatever it is you're being told with a grain of salt, right? The AI, for the most part, AIs are not very well trained. Their large language models are not very well trained on specifics of cocoa and chocolate, and so you need to be very, very careful. But what they can do is, especially if you've got an article or a page which is incredibly long, like 2,000 words, 3,000 words, 4,000 words, you'll be able to search not only for specific words, but you'll be able to get, okay, what's this overall about? And so you can use that to help you read the page. All right. So as you're reading the article, having a summary will help you read the page. Really, really important. Whoops. Really, really sorry about that. I am going back and forth between a couple of screens, and so uh, accidentally hid the screen that I was sharing. So it's really, really, again, really, really important that you take this capability with a grain of salt. Now, one of the things that can be done in every search engine is I can go in, or every browser is I can choose which search engine that I'm looking for. And so what I can do is I can come down here and I can create a new tab and I can say tell. So what am I searching for? Let's just say the word Aztec chocolate. I'm just making this up. What I've done is I'm using a search engine called Perplexity. Perplexity is creating, it's going in and doing a search on the internet. And what it will do is it will create a summary about Aztec chocolate. Not entirely sure why it's taking so long right now. It may be because I didn't turn off my VPN before I started this, and so it's being interrupted by the VPN. But I can tell you what it is that Perplexity is doing is it's going out through its sources and it's going to generate a summary. When it'll give me an answer, that answer will have footnotes that are related to topics, which are up here, and then it will give me a set of secondary questions. And then I can ask follow-up questions. So I don't have to leave the context of what it is that I'm doing. I can just do a search as I would normally do a search. I don't have to go to ChatGPT. I don't have to go anywhere else. I don't have to, it's in the context of what it is that I'm doing. There's another thing that ARC did, which is very, very interesting, which is, and I don't want to turn off my VPN because what it's going to do is it's going to interrupt this, is that what I can do is I can go in and when I'm doing a search query, right, what I can do is say, put it into a folder and then do, Aztec chocolate and then do a shift return, I believe. And what it does is it creates a folder. You'll notice that there is a folder here That folder is titled Aztec Chocolate, which is what I asked for. And then what it did is it put a series of search results here. Really, really cool. So, if I'm doing some research, I can very quickly ask a couple of different questions and it will find me some stuff. Now, this is not a replacement for using Google search or DuckDuckGo or any one of those searches, which will provide you with a whole lot of search results, right? But what it can be used, and again, I think this is what I would say about using all AI assists, is that what you've got is some different ways of organizing your thinking and guiding your thinking and guiding your research, which I think is really, really important. So I've been using ARC since literally a couple of weeks after it was opened up into beta testing. And it has so fundamentally changed the way I think about using my browser that I can't imagine this product going away and never being improved, right? And wanting to change to anything else ever. I mean, it is that profound an impact on the way I do my work. I mean, it is a Chrome fork, which means that any of the extensions that work with Chrome will work with this. If you're using any other browser, you can import all your bookmarks and everything like that into Arc, and so it doesn't. You don't have to abandon, right, your bookmark collection. It does take a little while to figure out how to use it most effectively, as most good tools do, right? But I got to tell you that for me, right, Arc from the browser company has been one of the most profound changes to the way I work on a general basis, and I cannot recommend it more highly to anyone. Um, uh, yeah, yeah. As I say, I can't imagine going back to using any other browser. A second tool that I use, really important, is called Ground News. And it's a service that I don't subscribe to yet, but I will. I got my VPN on. That I will be subscribing to shortly, because it's proven so valuable to me that I want to be able to support the service. So one of the things I can do is I can search for stories about chocolate. Uh, it will give me results about chocolate. Let's see if we can find one that actually has got an interesting. These are um, okay. So we've got this story from recently that says chocolate is not good for you. I'm not going to sign in. And so one of the things that Ground News does is it tells you how, number one, where the story appeared, right? But if this story has been repeated in more than one place, right? And if the story has been repeated in more than one place, right? Are the places where the article has shown up, the story has shown up, considered to be have a left leaning bias, a center leaning bias, or a right leaning bias? And so what you can do is you can go and take a look at how different this story is talked about from different perspectives. And I think this is really important, getting different expenses. So listening or reading a story, the same story as reported by the New York Times, the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal, is helpful at times. They'll cover the story differently. They'll have an emphasis on different points in the story. And this is, I have found to be a really, really, really good. Um, so I want to read the full article, right? So I can read the full article. I showed it up in the Gazette today, as a matter of fact, in the Montreal Gazette. Number one, I have no idea who Christopher Labos is. I wonder if I can do. Oops. Nope, I can't do an option, a right click on this page. Right. But what's interesting to do again is we have chocolate isn't good for you. Sorry. We can find out why he thinks about it. But here we have links to what may be. So the Danish diet. So none of these look like primary sources. Maybe the Physicians and Health Study is a primary source, but the Danish diet, cancer and health study, I'd have to go and look and see if this was a primary. So this is a BMJ. So BMJ is going to be a medical journal. And so, yeah, this is going to be a primary source. And so we can use it. So it's really, really useful to me, right, when it comes to understanding the nature of who is reporting and what is being reported and how is being reported. So ground news has been something that I am more and more I'm incorporating more and more into my research activities, especially in stories that around sustainability and traceability and climate change and things like that, right? Um, so yeah, really, 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 really important. I wonder if searching for cacao is going to give me high quality cacao in Amazonia. All right, clean steam engine developed to help farmers. So I happen to know the story, but if I wouldn't, I was like, what does cacao have to do with a clean steam engine? It's interesting that um, so Macwell and Company has developed a clean steam engine to help cacao farmers dry their beans. This is really cool, and it is not something that I normally would have run across. I haven't seen this before, so this is very cool. I'm actually gonna so you'll notice that what Arc did is it opened this up in a new temporary window. If I want to save this, what I just do is I click on these double arrows in here, and now it's been added to my Today tab, and I can figure out what to do with it later on. I don't have to worry. So I got to tell you, Arc has, again, really, really changed the way I think about using um, my browser as a research tool. So really, really important. Another tool that I use, which is really, really helpful, is called Summarize Tech, right? And what the Summarize Tech does is it takes the transcript, which is generated from by YouTube when a YouTube video goes live, and that transcript, I can then copy the transcript. So here's an example. This summary of this episode of Pod Save Chocolate with Anthony Fountain on EUDR, this summary was generated by Summarize.tech, right? And so again, I'm very, very transparent. The summary was generated by Summarize.tech, right? Again, I have no commission arrangement with Summarize.tech. But if I try to do and generate a summary from the captions which were generated, this is something that would take me an incredibly long time. So what I do is it generates the summary. It does it in 15 seconds or thereabouts. What I can do is I can copy that summary and I can edit it, right? But if you've got an hour-long YouTube video and what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what that video is about, right? Then using Summarize Tech, right, which will generate a timestamped. So you can say, oh, at 3 minutes in, it says this, and at 5 minutes in, it changes the topic, and at 18 minutes, there's another topic change. Which is different from the chapters which are generated within YouTube. What you can do is you can use Summarize Tech to be able to help you go through and say, oh, here is a topic in this video that I want to listen to what everybody has to say about this, right? Incredibly useful for reducing the amount of time that's necessary to go and look at something. Now, it may turn out that the summary is not perfect. It may turn out that it overlooks some things, and so you may jump through areas of interest. There's always that possibility. But even if you're reading an article straight, you might miss something the first time through, or the second time through, or the third time through. That's always going to be a possibility. But for me, where I get dozens of newsletters and articles in my inbox every day, and people sending me videos and seeing videos on the internet, this turns out to be an incredibly useful resource, right? Summarize Tech. There's another tool, which is called TLDR, so too long didn't read. And what it does is it will summarize any web page. So if you not using the Arc browser, right, which has got the ability to summarize what's going on a page from within the in-page search, what you can do is you can go to TLDR this, and you can just give it a URL, and it will summarize the page for you, right? Really, really helpful to do. And sometimes I can use, because there are different AIs, summarizing technique approaches, what I can, or large language models, I suppose. What I can do is I can do two different summaries, the one from within ARC and the one from within TLDR this, and I can have two different summaries of the same page. And I can say, how are they looking at these things different? Very, 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 very helpful. Again, my goal is like I get so much stuff. How do I get through it on a general basis, all right, on a daily basis? And these are some of the tools that I use to do that. The AI summary tools. I do not use the summaries that are generated. Um, um, the only place I use the summaries that are generated without are in the summaries to episodes of Pod Safe Chocolate, and I always attribute them. I do not try to make them my own so that everybody knows what it is that they're consuming. But they are helpful in terms of helping me focus on areas of videos, areas of press releases, areas of documents, of web pages where I want to focus my attention. And so that's really, really helpful. Again, I need to be aware of blind spots, and I need to be aware of things which corroborate what I already think. So it's really, really important to be able to do this in things where the opinions are ones you might not hold. You may want to find opinions which are in fact challenge what it is you're talking about. You won't get that from an AI in general. So you need to be aware of the limitations. This is a web page which provides links to tools that journalists use. So, um, so we have a whole bunch of them you can go and use to be able to figure out, for example, is an image real? How do you spot AI generated content? How can you go and find if an individual, really, really useful when I need to go in and say, is what it is that I am looking for genuine? Really, really important to do this. I also use spreadsheets. I use primarily Excel and a service called Airtable, which is a combination with a spread between a spreadsheet and a database, and a programmer's text editor called Sublime. So the reason why I use Sublime is it provides search and replace using regex general expressions, and really, really helpful tool for being able to take semi-structured data and structure it. Why is that important? Well, many of you may have seen that recently, like earlier this week, the Cacao of Excellence posted the winners for the 2023 edition of the Cacao of Excellence. Now, this list has been updated, right? And it's been updated because I recognized that there was something wrong with the original list. And the way I recognized that there was something wrong in the original list is I did a cut and paste. I just copied all this information into Sublime. So if I go and do a quick look at Sublime, so I copied all the information into Sublime, right? And then when I got done with doing that, what I did is I copied it into a spreadsheet. Now, this is after an hour or more of work, right? But what I realized in doing this is that in the original version of the results, there were duplicates, that this block of results and this block of results and this block of results were duplicated, right? And it turns out that the same things were given a gold, a silver, and a bronze, right? And obviously that's not correct. And this is not something I might necessarily have twigged on if I was just looking at this page of results, right? So it took putting it into a spreadsheet to say, there's something weird here. And so one of the great things about putting into a spreadsheet, so number one, right, what I do is I say, here is the original sort order. So if I do a sort, I can always get it back to the original order, right? Then I'm doing a count here that says how many golds are there, how many silvers are there, how many bronzes are. I mean, I'm finding ways to be able to figure out some underlying patterns in the data. And I'm duplicating, for example, gold and silver and bronze. I'm making sure that it's on every row so I can sort on every row by this criterion. So there are regions, I noticed that there was an inconsistency in the way regions are associated. Countries, again, there's the Democratic Republic of Congo originally, and so it's down here, Congo Democratic Republic of, and then Congo Republic of. Actually, so the DRC and so I have to ask a question: are they in fact different countries or the same country? I need to figure that out. I don't know, but in any event, so I was able to discover by putting this into a spreadsheet that there was an error, right? And I immediately contacted the organizers and I said, I think there's an error in this. To which they said, nah, you made a mistake. And then they came back to me and said, oh, no, there's actually an error there. And so I was able to go in and fix. They updated, it was a code error, so they were duplicating a section rather than pulling from individual sections. And so I was able to go and generate this table, right? And one of the things you can do using the sort command is you can organize the information that you've got here. And so one of the things that I was able to do, is this set of tables. Number one is of the 50 awards that were handed out, 18 gold, 16 silver, and 16 bronze. And I've got percentages of them. And I said, of the 50 awards, 12 were given to countries in the African and the Indian Ocean region. 11 were given Asia, Pacific, and Australia, which is weird, right? Because Hawaii is in this, right? The Central American and Caribbean, which is kind of weird because Puerto Rico, technically part of the United States, right? So where is the US in this? It's not represented separately in this. And we get South America. So we can say, of the awards, how many of them were awarded into each region? We see it's roughly evenly distributed, which we would expect in this day and age. And then what we do is we say, of the 18 golds, right, where were the most won? Ooh, Asia, Pacific, and Australia. Well, that's not necessarily intuitive. We would have thought maybe South America and Central America, but we can see that the vast number of golds were in fact awarded to the Central American and the Caribbean, more than 50%. Silver by region, similar. So what we can do is by getting things into a tool like Excel, what we can do is we can use the sorting capabilities and understand some of the underlying patterns that exist in the data. And what do they tell you about what's going on? Number one is like, why is Hawaii in the Pacific? Well, it makes sense that it's in the Pacific, but is it Asia? It's really part of the United States, and Puerto Rico is it's a territory of the United States. So politically it exists there. And Mexico is listed in Central America, and actually Mexico is in North America. So number one is that I got problems with the way the data here are presented because they actually don't represent geographical reality. That's another thing over here. Do they have to represent geographical reality? No, they don't. But what we need to see is in previous editions of this, are they having the same lumping together? Is Hawaii always in Asia, Pacific, and Australia? Why is Mexico in Central America when it is in North America, politically speaking? If these change, then analysis from edition to edition to edition is much more difficult, right? We need to understand. But what we can also do, and this is sort of a second level organization, is what we find is that there are a bunch of countries, right, that were given 3 awards, right? Several of them were given 2, and the rest of them were given 1. But which countries won the most awards? Well, the USA, Hawaii, right, it's not a country, right? But Hawaii won the most awards, and all of them were gold, which is interesting. Brazil won 3 awards, 2 golds and a silver. Indonesia won 3 awards, 2 golds and a silver. Peru won 3 awards, 2 golds and a bronze. Togo, right? We go to West Africa and we're thinking about, of all the countries in West Africa that's going to have the highest quality cocoa, Togo with a gold and a silver and a bronze. I mean, I want to know more about what's going on in Togo. And this, now that I've seen this, Ghana, 3 bronzes, Trinidad and Tobago, 3 silvers. And so we find some really interesting things. If we add USA and Puerto Rico to the list, we add Puerto Rico to this list, what we find is that the US, right, won 5 awards. So 3 golds, a silver and a bronze. And if we think about North America and we throw Mexico in, we add another bronze to this. So it's really, really interesting to find out, especially if you can do this from decade over decade over decade, so edition over edition over edition, going back to the original one, are there any trends in who wins and where the awards are given, and things like that. So I find that, this is part of my um, underlying curiosity about finding patterns in the data. And it turns out that a tool like Excel and then a tool like Sublime, which will allow me to do a lot of this kind of organization by search and replace very quickly on a raw text file, right? Which is, it ends up looking like this. So I'm searching for, space dash space and replacing with tabs and things which are really, really very, very easy to do using a tool like this. Really, really really, really handy. And so I just want to let you know that this is an exercise that I actually took yesterday in terms of doing stuff. And so it's really, really important when you look at data on a page that you take a very, very close look at it. Do not assume that it is right. Right? Do not assume that it is right. You cannot assume that it's right. A very, very simple error can result in results that do not make any sense. So be skeptical, look for patterns. It doesn't make sense that this happens. And as a matter of fact, originally the people that I reported to this to a cacao of excellence couldn't believe it had to be a mistake on my part, right, that I was doing this. And I said, I'm sorry, that's not the case. All right, having said that, so tools that I use, we have about 8 minutes left. I want to thank everybody who's been watching so far. If you've got comments or questions, throw them into the live chat on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. If you're watching on LinkedIn, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you've got a comment, that'd be great. Share with your friends, grow what it is that we're doing here on the Chocolate Life. So where do I go look for information? I go look at ResearchGate. So there are millions of research reports. And so I, on a regular basis, just go search for cacao, chocolate, and find new reports on topics that I'm interested in. If I run across a news article and there's no link to a primary source for research, what I may do is I may go see if I can find any related primary research here on ResearchGate. When I first opened my account on ResearchGate many years ago, you had to be associated. You had to use an email address from an educational institution, which fortunately I had from RISD, and I could do this, but I don't think you need to do that anymore. It's sort of like when Facebook opened up there, everybody. This is an invaluable resource, right, for finding research on topics that interest you. Now, I also love to go through Project Gutenberg and just search for chocolate and cocoa and get historical documents related to cocoa and chocolate. If I can, I download them into my computer and I put them into a folder so that I can look at them at a later time. Project Gutenberg is a great thing. I do a similar kind of thing. At the Internet Archive. I don't just use it for the Wayback Machine, but I'm looking for documents that I can use. And the same thing is true of Google Scholar. You can go and find interesting stuff. I use Google Alerts. These are the alerts that I've set up, right? I search for my name because I want to know my name. I get an alert on it in case anybody uses it. I work for working with the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum, International Cocoa Diplomacy. I always like to find out what's going on with Tony's Chocolate Lonely. I have a generic search on chocolate, cocoa or chocolate, but not Florida and not Canaveral, because Cocoa Beach, Florida, the International Cocoa Organization, and I'm also interested in OLEM in Nigeria. So what I will do is I can go institute one of these searches right now, right? And it'll say, oh, here are a bunch of stories having to do with cocoa. Fire, I'm not interested in a fire in 30 hectares of cocoa lands. You get a wide variety of stories. Many of them sort of are pop culture, have to do about recipes and things like that. But there are also enough links to news stories. So sometimes going to Google Alerts will find me a news story that I then go into Ground News to go and find out what's going on. So these things are related to each other. Really, really helpful, really, really important to be able to use these things. And then, of course, there's Wikipedia. The veracity and the reliability of the data in Wikipedia is sometimes suspect. But if I go search for cacao, this is where I think the real usefulness of Wikipedia sometimes lies is we can find the cacao, right, fits in this structure, Theobroma cacao. We have all these things underneath it. There are some places associated with it. Oh, I had no idea that Maria Cacao was a mountain goddess in the Philippines. Ooh, that could be interesting. Related to other things. So there's some disambiguation that can go on here as well. So really, really important. If I were to go to the cocoa bean, um, right, click on cocoa bean, then again, the references and the sources are are among the most valuable parts of things. So if you're looking to do research, don't just take a look at what's going on up here in the text of things. Go take a look down here in the links and resources. So take a look at what the footnotes are and what the footnotes are telling you. Really, really important. Okay, to do. Don't just take. Now, sometimes throwing. I mean, I'm here in ARC, and so let me do a quick find. Let's see, I can say, um, um, maybe I can just do summarize this page. Ask. It's too long. So they read the first 20%. Oh, here's an AI summary of the first 20%. Oh, yeah, man. So this could be helpful to what it is that you're doing. But but the important thing is I didn't need to go do this. I did not need to take this URL, go to ChatGPT and go do this. I can do it in the context of the page. So really, really important. And again, you don't want to take this at face value, the AI summary at face value. It becomes a link into um, providing inspiration on other places that you want to go. It may sound really strange, but the r/chocolate subreddit on Reddit, there are lots of questions that there's a lot of, here's what I'm making for Valentine's Day and things like that. It seems to be like 50% of all the posts have to do with bloom and temper and things like that. But there are some really interesting questions that get asked here on a regular enough basis, and I respond to. So I'm at Discover Chalk. So here's my little guy. You'll recognize my avatar. Um, it's one of only like two or three subreddits in all of Reddit that I'm active in any way. And one of the things that it does is that there are a lot of people who are just general consumers who don't have a lot of background. In craft chocolate and specialty chocolate, and so it's one place to keep on top of some aspects of consumer sentiment, right? I also go take a look at a lot of industry publications. So International Confectionery Magazine that I write for, I'm the technical editor. Confectionery News, Confectionery Production, Confectionery Kennedy's. You can subscribe to these publications, and so you can get a lot of news in your mailbox on a daily basis. Again, there's so much I can't look at all of it, um, but having these summary tools, searching in them, I can find out if anything has to do with cocoa or chocolate, and it's really, really helpful in terms of finding multiple viewpoints on the same topic. The more different places you subscribe to, the more different places you get to, the greater perspective you'll be able to bring to any particular topic, right? So I went over the cautionary tale, which is the cacao of excellence. What I did is, if you want to, what you can do is you can download the original screenshot to the page. All right, so I actually took the page before it was fixed, and I did a screenshot of it. You can go download it. It's so long, I didn't want to incorporate it into the page. Oh, and by the way, I was out walking this morning, and I slipped and fell on the ice. That's what that is. Don't worry about it. It's much better than it was 3 hours ago when I fell on the ice, black ice in the shade. Yeah, it looks worse than it is, but anyway. So I also want to talk about, I think, what one of my new favorite resources is, and I love maps, and I love um, things like timelines and things like this. And so there is a collection called the David um, Rumsey Map Collection. It's at a university in California. I don't remember exactly where. And one of the things that you can do, which is really fun, is you can go and search for a word in a map. What? I can go search for it. So one of the things I did is I just asked for it to search for the word chocolate, and there are 534 maps in the collection, which contain the word chocolate somewhere on the map. And um, one of the things that I learned is that there is Here in Arizona, um, there is a Chocolate Mountains. It's down here in Yuma County, right here, Chocolate Mountains, right? So didn't know there was a Chocolate Mountain range in Arizona, which is where I live now. And so I think one day I'm going to have to figure out how I can make a road trip and go find out about the Chocolate Mountains here in Arizona. But again, what I think that's really, really important here is that what we have is there are maps of the solar system. We have guides to, we have timelines, aerial photographs, globes. I mean, all kinds of historical stuff. And almost all of this is in the public domain. And when you download it, what you do is you get not only a picture, which you can download at a particular site, but you get all of the source citation data associated with the image in the collection, which is really, really helpful and really, really valuable. I mean, I could spend, and I already have spent hours just looking at all of these different, or not all of these, but some hundreds of thousands, I forget the number of images that are in the collection. But this has become one of my new favorite resources for just looking through stuff and finding stuff and exploring just inspiration for how to represent things and how things have been represented. So when you have complex technical questions and you're looking for ways to represent them visually, sometimes a resource like this is just finds you incredibly good inspiration for being able to answer a bunch of really, really interesting questions. Yeah. And with that, we've hit the hour. All right, I'm going to go back very quickly and I'm going to say what I've done, what I've tried to do over the course of the hour is give you how I go about researching stuff. A lot of it has to do with my background, so where I came from, and what each one of you is going to do is you are going to bring your background to the way you research, right? And what it is that how you it is you approach what you're doing for. I mean, I am really lucky, fortunate, right? Not lucky, but I am fortunate. I worked hard. I'm not lucky. I'm fortunate, that I had a background of roughly 20 years of doing this before I got into doing it in chocolate full time. And so I brought what it is that what I knew about my work in high technology. So computer graphics, interactive multimedia, high definition television, internet pressure. I brought all that to chocolate. So I had these things. Now, fortunately today, what that means is that I have since 1996 or thereabouts, so long time, so 25 plus years, I have a history which is specific to research about cocoa and chocolate, right? And that history of research about cocoa and chocolate is animated and informed by the fact that I was selling Michel Cluzel and Domori to Michelin-starred restaurants in New York in the late 1990s and early 2000s, right? So I've been to producing countries throughout Latin America, into the Caribbean, and in Africa. So I've got that background, hands-on, personal contact, that I can draw upon those personal experiences. I've been to the largest chocolate factory in the world in Visa, Belgium, run by Callebaut. I've been to very, very small micro factories, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the Americas. And so I'm able to bring all of that personal experience to what it is that I do. It provides the perspective, it provides the lens. And as a fine artist, one of the things that you are encouraged to do, one of the things you are trained to do in a formal academic setting is to learn how to trust your intuition on these things. And one of the things that I will say, and I repeat, right, is that from 1996, when I really started doing my research into cocoa and chocolate in earnest, and it wasn't until 2003 that I made my first trip to a producing country. So I visited my first cocoa farm along the Rio Napo in Napo province in Ecuador in 2003 as part of the University of Chocolate program, which was organized by Pierrick Chouard, who's the founder of Vintage Chocolates, now Vintage Plantation Chocolates. And, there I had an opportunity to meet, among other people, John Kehoe, who's now director of sourcing at Guittard. So, but the important story is not the people that I met or anything like that. But it was that until I had that personal firsthand experience of being on a farm, a cacao farm in Ecuador in 2003, everything that I knew about cocoa and chocolate was book learning. It was from other people's experience. And so I cannot tell you how important it is when you want to be writing about cocoa and chocolate. I cannot, or any other topic. I mean, how important it is to have that personal firsthand experience and being able to speak from, to bring that experience, right, to however you're going to be interpreting and communicating about what it is that you're doing. So it doesn't matter the tools you're using, right? As a journalist, as a chocolate critic, right? As somebody who's an observer of cocoa, as a maker of chocolate, you need to have your viewpoint. And whatever you're doing needs to express that's what you're doing, right? And it comes from an internal awareness and understanding of a truth and understanding of how you see the world, right? How you articulate what it is that you see, and then how you communicate your understanding to other people. So use Chrome, use whatever it is you're using. Use Arc. Don't use Ground News. Use Ground News. Use spreadsheets. Don't use spreadsheets. Whatever it is that you do, organize your computer the way that makes the most sense to you to organize your computer. But if you're going to be writing about this, if you're going to be a journalist, if you're going to be a critic, right, it is first and foremost, irrespective of the tools that you're using, the single most important tool that you have as a journalist, as an observer, as a critic, right, as a maker, right, is a foundation um, conviction or point of view, right, which is rooted in personal experience. And you need to communicate not only your interpretations of the world through that personal conviction, that understanding that you have, but you also need to communicate what that is, right? Because they represent the biases that you have, the way you look at the world, right? So the more you know about me and my background and how I look at the world, right, the easier it is for you to say, hey, number one, I think this Clay guy has no idea what he's talking about, and so I don't need to pay attention to him. Or I think this Clay guy has some interesting things to say. And I want to pay attention to what it is that I have to say or anybody else has to say on this because I know where he's coming from. I know how he works. I know what his process is. I know what his methods are. I know how he works. I know what it is that he's looking to achieve. And he is able to communicate with me, right? Not to me, but we are able to communicate. He's able to communicate with me, right? In ways that I can understand. I may not agree with. Right? It's important. I don't necessarily want you to agree with everything that I say, but I want you to understand that there is a method, there is a process, there is a goal, there is at least a mission, right? And that whatever it is that I am going to be talking about is going to come from this place, right? Whether you agree with my opinions or not. And I think that that is that difference of opinion, right? So, do you agree with what it is I have say? Do you not agree with what it is I say? Right? This is where I think important decisions or important discussions, not important decision, important discussions can begin. If you don't understand where I'm coming from and how I arrived at my viewpoint, and I don't understand where you come from, how you arrive at your viewpoint, um, the discussions are not as productive as they can be or often need to be, right? And so this is what I wanted to do in the process of today. I wanted to give a deep dive into the tools I use to research cocoa and chocolate on the interwebs. I want to give you an idea what my background is so that you know where it is that I'm coming from. And that as you go through your own research on cocoa and chocolate on the interwebs, that you are maybe perhaps a little more mindful about how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and what you're going to be doing, what you learn, right? And with the goal of being a more effective communicator, right? A more effective advocate for the positions that you hold, right? And with that, I'm out for today, except to remind everybody that This episode of Pod Save Chocolate is sponsored, as all episodes of Pod Save Chocolate are, by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, you can go over to the website. This is the post for today. You can click on this green button. It says account. I'm logged in. It'll say join. Become a member of the Chocolate Life. If you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. If you can, comment, and then share this on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook with colleagues to grow the work that I'm doing and support the work that I'm doing here. I want to, by mentioning that this coming Friday's episode is going to feature an interview with Volker Lehmann. So people may know Volker from his work in Bolivia, the Hacienda Tranquilidad, and bringing wild cacao to the market for the first time in the early 2000s. Volker's just a dear friend. I've been to Bolivia twice, and he spent quite a bit of time with him there. And we're going to be talking about cacao boliviano, the wild cacao, the Alto Bene, the Beni in the Antenes, which is where the Hacienda Tranquilidad is located, and a bunch of other things related to Bolivian cacao. That's this coming Friday, which is the 16th of February. Again, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time is the start of that. So I hope you'll be there, and I'll be posting about the episode with links and all kinds of resources today or tomorrow, so that you can follow up beforehand and throw in comments. And with that, again, I just want to thank everybody who's been here today, right? And to close, as I often do, with just a quick reminder: chocolate makes people happy, right? When I'm working with chocolate, it makes me happy. Smelling it, getting my hands dirty with it. I know that the chocolate that I am working with, if I gift it to someone else, it's going to make them happy, right? And it's important to keep in mind that fundamentally, chocolate is about making people happy. So if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody.